Good morning, everybody. In my latest video on Tekken 7, where we talked about the leak of Season 2, I spoke a little bit of Japanese in the beginning of the video, and I had a lot of great comments about that. I didn't realize it until after the fact, but it might actually be the first time I actually speak the language properly on the channel. And I had a lot of questions about how to learn a new language and how to learn specifically Japanese and so on. So I thought maybe I'll make a quick video talking about that here. Now, I don't want you to worry, the focus of the channel isn't going to shift or anything. It's still going to be about video games, mainly about Tekken obviously, but every once in a while it might be cool to make a video like this just to give, the channel a little bit of a personal twist. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I have no formal background in education whatsoever. I'm actually an economist by education, which is weird, and then sort of a linguist by inclination, but I have no qualifications when it comes to teaching languages, even though I've done it a couple of times in a couple of different places. So you have to take everything I say with a grain of salt, because I'm not backing it up with any official statistics or research or whatever. So with that out of the way, I think what I want this video to be about is just about that sort of initial experience when you're trying to start out with a new language for the first time, because I remember that being such a jungle, and looking back at it, there are so many pitfalls, I think, during those first few months. If you start Googling about, for example, picking up Japanese right now, you'll find that it's actually a huge industry. There are all kinds of different services and newsletters and applications and programs you can sign up for, and if you let the internet know that you're interested in learning Japanese, they will never leave you alone. I get emails to this day from people trying to sell me a course in Japanese, even though it's been years since I stopped studying the language. So my biggest tip when it comes to this is that you should try and stay away from all that stuff as much as possible. And the reason I say that is that I think, first of all, most of it is much more about trying to extract your money than actually trying to teach you something. And second of all, all of that stuff, I have a lot of friends who are like, oh, I have this great new service, a new program that I'm using and I'm learning so much. But it's very, very similar to when you have a friend who goes on a new diet and they're like, oh, I'm losing all this weight and I'm doing this diet and I'm super motivated. And then that lasts maybe a couple of weeks, and then they start falling off. The consistency starts to fall off, and then it becomes this thing that they sort of put on a shelf, and then whenever they look at that shelf they feel bad. Their self-esteem goes down because it's something that they're skipping out on, not doing the way they were supposed to. And if you know you are a person, I think most of us are, who functions kind of like that, where you're not able to stick to a long-term rigorous program over many months or even years, then don't worry about signing up for these like services and courses and stuff like that. You can do much, much better if you approach this in a more guerrilla style. So what I mean is that, from my perspective, what I've learned is that I think languages are very unique as academic subjects, let's say, because they're very different from something like, for example, mathematics, and they're much closer to something like music and learning an instrument. Now, I am not good at math and I don't play any instruments, so it's a very presumptuous example for me to bring up. But if you think about it this way, you can learn how to do something mathematically by studying it very close for a long amount of time. If you have textbooks and explanations and you try things out on paper, that's how you pick up a subject like that a lot of the time. I mean, and then it probably gets super advanced and goes way over my head at some point. But if I give you a textbook, or many textbooks, every textbook ever written on how to play the guitar, and you sit down in a room and you read all of those books on how to play an instrument, and I come back to you after you've read absolutely everything ever written on that, and I give you a guitar, do you think that you would be able to play something beautifully? You might be able to tell me that, oh, this is a G chord and this is how you hold your fingers and this is this chord or whatever, but could you actually turn that into something that approaches a pleasant melody? Probably not. But if you spent all that time that you spent learning and reading about how to play the guitar, actually holding a guitar and getting comfortable with the feeling of having it pressed against your body and feeling the strings on your fingers and trying to make different sounds, you will start to build up this intuitive sense of how to make sounds with that instrument. And I think languages are extremely similar to that. And so while you will have to at some point actually look at textbooks and sit down with a pen and paper and do more traditional studying, that is actually something that is going to be more of a supplement if you're going to learn it the way I did and the way I think most people do it successfully. And the most important thing is going to be something completely separate. So what I recommend you do is actually just to try and expose yourself to the language that you're trying to learn in as many ways as possible. When I picked up Japanese, I watched a lot of anime in the beginning when I was young, but then I also started to get into Japanese music, so I'd listen to that, and then sometimes I would watch, movies in Japanese with subtitles. And if you can do that, what's going to happen is, because you're a human being and we are these pattern-seeking creatures, a new language is going to sound like complete gibberish in the beginning, but if you start to pick up bits and pieces here and there, they're going to start to synergize, and then the rate at which you're picking up the language and seeing the internal structure of it, the rate is just going to increase exponentially over time. So it's going to be a slog in the beginning and then get a lot easier, because when you're listening to all this stuff and you're supplementing it a little bit with actually, okay, what does this mean? And you look stuff up in proper, dictionaries and books, is your brain starts to connect the dots, and it actually does a lot of the work for you. A lot of it is actually subconscious. And so I think if you can expose and just soak your brain in the language as much as you can initially, that's actually one of the most useful things that you can do. And then actually use your own mouth, trying to mouth and speak words. If you have the opportunity to speak the language you're trying to learn with somebody, that's great. But if you can't, it's gonna be embarrassing and difficult, but just close your bedroom door and speak out loud to yourself. Try to get the sounds to come out properly, and try to become comfortable with using this language, and sort of trying to get it into your spine and into your body, right? That's really the most important thing. And then when you have to look something up, or you have to provide a little bit of structure, that's when you're going to rely on textbooks and more like traditional materials like that, I think, at least. It's kind of like, if we're going to use a very Swedish example here, if you're trying to build like the world's most complex piece of flat pack furniture, maybe you're building a flat pack house. I mean, you can look at these pieces and try and put them together, and you can get very, very far without an instruction manual, but it's probably a good idea to every once in a while refer to the instruction manual. And that's sort of my analogy for using textbooks and stuff to supplement your learning when it comes to a language. And if you want to use these digital services and apps and stuff, and you think that's fun for you, and you think you can have a lot of success with that, that's great, and I hope you get far with that. It's just never something that has worked for me or anybody I know, but maybe that's just because we're different as people. There are a lot of channels out there on YouTube and stuff who do like the Japanese word of the day. Honjitsu no kotoba wa ringo desu. The word of the day is apple. And then, oh, now I've learned how to say apple in Japanese, and you feel good about that. But the problem is that if you're trying to build up a vocabulary that's going to work that way, it's going to take you something like 150 years to get anywhere. But if you can think about the sentence honjitsu no kotoba wa ringo desu, and sort of try and identify where the verb is, where the noun is, and you start to think about those other sentences that you heard in that song you really like, in that chorus, and you go, oh, maybe that's how that works. And then maybe you try it out, and it turns out you were wrong, and so you look up why you might be wrong, and this sort of synergy starts to build exponentially. But it's much more about, like I say, exposure and actually trying to use your own mouth and your own body to manipulate the sounds, than it is about sitting down and feeling bad about not being able to understand something that is on a written page. And so I think my biggest tip for you is just try to have as much fun as you can. And if you are trying to allocate time to study a language and you just do not feel like sitting down and doing something that might be boring to you right now, do something else. Watch a movie in the language you're trying to learn, or maybe even look up the history of the country you're trying to learn about, or the country of the language you're trying to learn, because you want it to be a fun project for you that you are doing in your spare time because you want to. And it's going to take you, at the very least, depending on, you know, if you're very talented when it comes to this stuff, at least a couple of years to get there. And so you have to sort of strap in for the long haul, right? So those are just my quick initial tips, and then if you want to get specific about Japanese and other stuff in future videos, we'll probably make more, but it's sort of going to depend on the response I get on this video, whether or not there's some genuine interest out there. I mean, I'm not looking for like a ton of views or anything, but if there are people out there who genuinely find it interesting and useful, then maybe we'll talk more about it. But that's today's quick video, and definitely let me know if you want to see more. But for the very next video, we're probably going to be talking about Tekken again. Looking forward to EVO, of course. Looking forward to Season 2 news, of course. Talon was revealed for Soul Calibur 6, and she looked cringy. About 50% cringe, about 50% awesome. So, but that's always been Soul Calibur, right? Characters just won't stop talking. It's so awkward. But yeah, awesome stuff on the horizon. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye for now.